Okay, I have a slideshow for this. As I was telling Joe a couple minutes ago, I did not have much success at work this week sharing my screen. I'm going to give it a try. Joe has the slides as a backup if this doesn't work, so please bear with me. Screen. Okay, can people see my slides?
Not yet.
Not yet.
So you should be able to share.
Yeah,
If you go to share screen
I did. Share screen. Oh, here we go. Wait a minute.
and then click on the one that you want to share. There you go. Yay.
There it is. It just took it a minute. Okay. And let's see my controls. Hang on here. Okay, there we go. All right. So as you all know, this is the adult forum on February 21st. And I think you all know who I am, Coral Childs. I'm going to back up a minute. This is supposed to be a forum on the Lenten challenge, but I want to provide some background before I get to that. So we officially created a social justice ministry last fall. This is nothing new. It is formalizing something that Resurrection has been doing since well before I ever came to Resurrection. I have some examples there. We've been working on feeding the hungry through last Saturday, through the food pantry. We have supported education with our support for the international academies and other schools in the Alexandria Public School System. We've been involved in affordable housing through the building of the Spire. Social justice, nothing new at Resurrection, just a fancy name for something we've done all along. So we formalized this group and the question became, our building's almost done. We've rethought food with the change in our building, other things. What do we want to focus on next? So 2020, you all know, was the year of the pandemic, or the first year of the pandemic. We were in the middle of a rather contentious presidential election, and racism was in the news a lot. The George Floyd killing in Minneapolis. There were other ones resulting in protests across the country, National Guard being called out, the Black Lives Matter movement. Of those things, and those weren't the only key events in 2020, those were just a couple of the big ones. Racism seemed to jump out as something we might want to look at in the future. All right, so we've got a topic, and the next question was, where do we go from here? I personally am not a big fan of reinventing the wheel, so I got on the phone and I spent several hours talking to Aisha Huerta with the Diocese of Virginia. And she had fabulous ideas. She works with their multicultural and racism ministry. I forget her exact title. I believe she has spoken at Resurrection before.
Yes.
So you might remember her. But she sent me to other Episcopal churches in our area who were working on racial justice. They included St. George's Arlington and Trinity in Arlington. Several were out of the area, like Holy Comforter in Richmond. And one of the ones on the list, and Joe had also mentioned, was something called Potomac Episcopal in Fairfax County. I'm like, what the heck is Potomac Episcopal? I've never heard of this church. Well, that's because it's not a church. It is several churches. They are small Episcopal churches in the Alexandria area of Fairfax County. So they are outside the city limits, though their mailing addresses are Alexandria. And due to a number of things, including declining numbers, they have been worshiping together, doing their social activities together, various other ministries together. And they, within the past year or so, had created their own social justice committee. And while I spoke with Case Ramey, who is the Reverend at All Saints Sharon Chapel, it just seemed like this group was a real good fit for resurrection in a lot of ways. They also had a strong history amongst them of social justice issues. They were open to collaboration with other churches, even churches who weren't in Fairfax County or in Alexandria City. They were thrilled to have us there. So this group meets Sunday mornings at 11:45 usually. Myself, Amanda Van, and Cynthia Bullard Perez have regularly been attending for a couple months now. Some other people from Resurrection have popped in and out. Any and all of you are welcome to join us. They're a friendly group. If you want to stay and finish up Resurrections Forum before cutting over to Potomac Episcopal, that's fine. They don't mind if you're a few minutes late, they understand. They have two main groups. Their first group they call the Education and Activities Group. That group focuses on things like I'm doing right now, forums, Lenten series, other types of training and discussion. Their second group they call their Engagement and Activism Group. That group was very involved in the fall elections in terms of getting out the vote. They wrote a lot of postcards, they made phone calls, they sent emails, all politically neutral. It was simply a voter drive to get the vote out. They did not discuss how they thought people should vote at all. Since November, they have been lobbying Virginia state legislators regarding the death penalty in Virginia. The death penalty in this country is not applied uniformly. It disproportionately affects people of color, particularly African Americans, and it has been passed by both houses of the legislature. The last I knew, the governor had not signed it yet, though he had indicated he would, which would abolish the death penalty in the state of Virginia. Because they have spent so much time on legislative matters, I don't have it here on my slide, but they have recently created another group to focus strictly on legislation at the state and local level. And Cynthia Bullard Perez has graciously volunteered to lead that group. It's only a couple weeks old, but if anyone has an interest in that, please let Cynthia know, and please come on over to a Potomac Episcopal meeting. We would be glad to see you. So, starting to feel like maybe we're starting to get this social justice thing under control for Resurrection. We've got the ball rolling, and many of you have been in this position. Joe appears and says, hey, can you do something for Lent? And if you're like me, your first reaction is something really intelligent like, and I managed to stammer out a yes, I think so. Then the next thing I thought was, I have a friend And her comment is, yeah, Lent and social justice, those things go together like mashed potatoes and jam. And that was sort of the same feeling I had. What the heck am I going to do for Lent that has to do with social justice? And these were just some of the random thoughts I had at the time about social justice and wanting to honor God and Jesus by living like Jesus. What the heck is Lent really for? And what am I going to do with these random thoughts? Someday one of us is going to have to learn to look at Joe and say no, but it is not going to be me. So, and I was sitting in another forum and inspiration struck. And I don't think I saw her online, but thank you, Reverend Susan. She was the source of my inspiration. As many of you know, Reverend Susan recently completed a forum series on women of the Book of Mark. And one of the themes we saw over and over was how marginalized women were in the first century in the Middle East, but that did not bother Jesus. And I managed to make a parallel between that marginalized population and African Americans in 21st century Alexandria also being a marginalized population. So that gave me my key for my social justice challenge for Lent. And I will be eternally grateful to Reverend Susan for her inspiration. So, 40 days, social justice Lenten challenge. Boy, that's a mouthful. Okay, so we've talked about my random thoughts on Lent being a preparation for Easter, wanting to live as Jesus did, whatever a 21st century version of that looks like. Marginalized people, reaching out to them like Jesus did. So the first thing I'm going to back up to is that 40. Okay, 40. It's a very significant number in the Bible. It appears a lot of places. I have a couple examples here. Those are not the only ones. Those of you in the weekly Bible study probably can rattle off another half dozen without even trying. There is disagreement among biblical scholars on, is that literally 40 days, or does it have a symbolic significance, simply meaning a long time or something else? My advice is 40 days is a long time. If 40 does not work for you, does not fit your schedule, I'm not sure it's going to fit mine, single parent, full-time job, but we're going to give it a shot. If 40 doesn't work for you, pick another number. Don't sweat it. Do one a week, decide you're going to do 10, do something, but don't get hung up on 40. So what I came up with, and I ran this by a number of people. I ran it by my Quest group. I ran it through the community outreach ministry with the vestry. They came back to me, God bless them, with all kinds of suggestions and help. So a shout out to all of them. We came up with 40 activities. Some of them focus on racism in general. Some of them are specific to Alexandria, Virginia. Kind of lumped them into categories. There are things to read. These range from short magazine articles that can be found online to entire book suggestions. There are pieces of music to listen to based on African-American performers. If you are a movie person, there are some suggested movies to watch. Some of them are older movies, so part of the thought process should involve why were they so significant at that time, though they might not stand up to 21st century standards. Some of them are newer movies. Historic visit was one category we came up with. There are an incredible number of sites in Alexandria that are historically significant, especially to the African-American community. And most of them, in an attempt to be pandemic friendly, can be visited virtually as well as in person. So those of you who are not out and about due to the pandemic are certainly will be able to see them virtually on your computer. If you are out and about, we provided addresses so you could find them, short descriptions. I probably lived in Alexandria for about 10 years before I realized that the city was occupied by Union troops during the Civil War. It's just not something, I don't think Alexandria itself publicizes its history necessarily very well. They're working on it, trying to improve it. And then there was a last category we simply called learn. It was things that didn't naturally fit into one of the other categories. It includes some websites, it includes some podcasts to listen to, all on a variety of topics, but somehow tied back to racism. The things we chose, there is no particular significance to them. I mean, historic sites in Alexandria, I probably have a list of 30 or 40. We just picked, I think, about 10 of them to put on this list randomly. Again, with the movies, there are a lot of movies out there. We tried to pick some old ones. We tried to pick some new ones. We tried to pick different genres of music. With the reading, like I said, we did everything from magazine articles to entire books. It all kind of depends on what appeals to you. And as I mentioned earlier, whenever possible, there is a digital link, an online link, so that as much of this as possible can be done online to keep everyone safe in the pandemic. Whoop. Let's see if I can do the next one. That might be the last one. Oh, that is the last one. I believe, Joe, did you tell me the list is available on the website for the church right now?
It will be by tomorrow.
It will be by tomorrow.
Yep.
And I think that, so there we go. We have a 40-day, if you choose 40-day Lenten challenge focused on racism and African-American history in Alexandria. Questions?
So I visited a fair number of the sites. In fact, I visited all of the sites. You can do it all online. I didn't watch all the movies yet. I've seen some of them before, you know, and they're very, very interesting. It got a nice wide array of things to choose from. So, you know, the music and explanations and all of that is quite a trip. Be interesting to see, you know, your reactions if you try a few of them.
Lenore?
Joe and I were looking for something to do outside last weekend, and we went down to the Freeman Cemetery in Alexandria, and that's totally pandemic friendly because it's a huge open space. There were only 2 other people there that Saturday. Parking is a little tricky. But it's quite sobering and quite moving to go there. So that's something you can do that's outdoors and relatively safe.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of you might remember there many years ago, there was a gas station on that corner at one point on Washington Street. And I think were they widening the road or something when they discovered the remains of the cemetery?
Oh, wow.
I don't remember the exact details, but some of it was quite large, much larger than it is now paved over by Washington Street.
Mhm.
The history of that includes people taking the property, even though they knew it was a cemetery, and using it for other things. And there's been a history of that, throughout, unfortunately, our history everywhere. And so, it's quite a project to get the land back. One of those things that we should have known, but were willfully ignorant of, that there had been a cemetery there.
Well, interestingly, apparently they preserved all the pages of the entries of the names of the people buried there. And they have a brick wall around this beautiful sculpture. And it has images of each page and the names. You can't find all the grave sites, but at least they know. And there were a lot of, it was active from 1865 to 1869, I think it was.
Yeah. So there's 540 graves there, and they know who's there, but not where.
The other nice thing is the team that spearheaded the whole thing was made up of African Americans and whites. It was a good combined effort.
Yeah. You got the sense it was holy ground.
Yeah.
And initially, members of the USCT, United States Colored Troops, buried there also, but then they petitioned Congress to be buried in Alexandria National Cemetery. And initially they were barred from there because of their race, but eventually they won their petition. And so those bodies were exhumed. And then there's a whole section over in Alexandria National Cemetery where they are buried together. Kat?
I see this effort as a useful one for raising individual consciousness. And we all could do with a dose of that on this issue. But I'm sort of puzzled about what our ultimate outcome is. Is it just to make each of us a better person? Or what do we do with this new awareness and new sense of purpose? Is that what then gets channeled into the Potomac Episcopal initiatives on legislation and joint public action, for example? Is resurrection going to do anything more concrete, I guess, is what I'm asking.
You're talking about the social justice ministry?
Yeah.
Yes. Our initial discussions, we felt like the congregation as a whole wasn't all on the same page. And we felt like we needed to start with some education to get us closer together in what we knew in terms of history and where we thought we were going. And yes, the idea is that eventually is that we will move more into an activist role, but we're starting with education.
But there's nothing that keeps us individually acting, even while that education process
right.
holds. And
Come
you
on
know,
and
yeah. And I would hope that we would, from all of us, would spring up a decision or information or a call in a way to what we should do together. That it isn't something we impose on each other, come along or else or whatever, but that it feels like something we need to do together, when we do something corporately. And so I wouldn't get in the way of that, if that's springing up from our whole congregation. But my sense is that if we were to begin to try to do that now, we might not get to the same place that we want to be if we were to work at coming together about it. I would hope as you individually do one or more of these things, you'd talk about it, and I'm sure that we could get your reactions into the newsletter or the e-notes or wherever, you felt comfortable about it. But as you did it, if you're moved by it positively or even negatively, let's hear it. Let's hear what God is doing through this.
David?
Coral, do you envision other activities like this on other aspects of justice-related issues?
Yes. I know that we are tentatively scheduled for another forum, we being the Social Justice Committee, for another forum in June. At the moment, our intended focus is to talk about Juneteenth. Potomac Episcopal is interested in joining us on that day. I think, Joe, you talked to them a little bit about that last Sunday when you joined us. I wasn't in that particular breakout room.
Yeah, I did. And I know there are people interested in other aspects of social justice as it relates to the ecological aspects of it. And there are other aspects of social justice. And this isn't to preclude any one of those. I tend to see where the energy is flowing, And so if something really inspires you in another direction, let's hear it.
The other legislative issues that we're working on with Potomac Episcopal are a minimum wage for farm workers and paid sick leave for all workers. Again, not necessarily the first thing that would pop into your mind when you are thinking a racial justice issue, but both of those do disproportionately affect people of color.
And as we're discovering Latinos. I say that because the percentage of people who get food in our food pantry since the economic downturn related to the pandemic is a lot in our area of the world. The West End is a lot more Latino than it is people of color. It's a lot to do.
Does this connect at all with the class that several of you are taking? Does it intersect in ways, or is this the basis? I forget the name of it now. Building
Sacred ground. Yeah.
Sacred ground. Right.
I would say some places where the two intersect. Sacred ground so far has not focused exclusively on African Americans. Last session was looking at Native Americans. This afternoon's session is African Americans. I assume at some point we'll get to the Hispanic population. But yeah, there are obviously places where they connect.
Yeah, and I would add that the sacred ground is part of the broad education piece. You know, we might have a heart for action, and we should act, you know, but we can be willfully or unintentionally, either way, ignorant, you know, of some of the ways that the policies in our country have shaped our situation, so that we're blind to how much better we have it maybe than others, you know. And so, you know, we can work together with a different kind of resolve if we have a basis for understanding what's been called the original sin of our country, which is racism, you know, across the whole spectrum of people.
Lenore?
I discovered last night, quite by accident, that on FiOS channel 232, they ran a whole series of movies last night, among them Steven Spielberg's Amistad. Guess Who's Coming to Dinner was one of them. And Hidden Figures. And I don't know if they had started earlier in the day, but and I don't know if they do it every night. But Amistad is a particularly sobering look at slavery. Anyway.
Thank you, because I'm having Joe put a reminder in e-notes every week about the Potomac Episcopal meetings, but also trying to put in there if we see something of interest, like this is going to be on TV, or this book was reviewed in the Post or something. So thank you. And thank you to anybody else who has something they'd like us to publicize a little bit. Linda Goff, did I see your hand?
Yes, I have a question. Joe, you're going to put in suggestions for movies and books. Is that right? Was my understanding? I got a little lost. Are you going to do a listing?
Well, first off, we have the list, the 40-day challenge. So are those. But everybody and their brother's doing Black History Month this year up big because of this. Everybody wants to do something, you know, and that's a good impulse. And they know we're all kind of locked down in a way that we wouldn't be. So we're hunting for things to do, you know. And so everybody has a bunch of really interesting, good things, you know. And if somebody recommends one, like Potomac Episcopal or you, hey, I saw X, or, you know, I recommend Y, you know, I tried this and it was really good. Or I tried this and Run for the Hills, it was really bad. Let us know and we'll share it with you, you know. But it's not like it's an organized effort. It's just there's so many things out there. And everybody, including us, is so interested in doing something, you know.
So my other question then is, are you going to provide, like, it's a big area.
Yeah.
Are you going to provide general reflections that we should be looking at certain areas, or just as the whole area in general?
Yeah, I'd like to, but I can tell you now, I don't have the time for that.
Yeah.
And
I just want to remind people that several months ago in the newsletter, there was a list of 10 books recommended for reading in this area that Andrea Blackford and B. Taylor helped me assemble as ones they thought would be of particular interest and across sort of the spectrum of thinking on this subject. So I don't remember offhand what month that was, but and you probably don't save your inspires, but I
do.
I do.
Okay, I don't.
And
I saved 2 years worth, but you know, you might be able to find that and pick some from there. At the time, they were all very long waiting lists at the library, but I now have read 9 of the 10 or 11 of them that I've been able to get from the library.
Yeah, could you post that list again, or somebody else, because I don't remember seeing it.
Okay.
I
Betsy,
remember
did I
seeing
see-
it, but I don't keep my inspires.
I
I
thought I
was
saw
just,
Betsy. I thought,
on that subject, I was going to suggest, and they always say, don't suggest something. I'm going to suggest this. I cannot do it myself, but Joe can't either. So if one person would want to be the collator, I'm sure if one person sent titles or names to Joe, once a week, I'm assuming you might copy it and put it into eNotes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But can't do
And-
the research and the gatherings. So
and
I think
Lynn,
it's up to somebody else who would be willing to gather and, copy, send it as a list to Joe where it could just be copied.
and
My
if there's anybody out there interested in a book group, Potomac Episcopal is looking for somebody to lead one or somebodies. I will keep you posted, Linda, or everyone, if they pull it off, but they're hunting around for someone willing to take on a book group focused on social justice.
Yeah, but there's one at the library that you
Yes, there
recommended on
is.
the 40-day Lenten challenge list. Somebody
Mhm.
should try that out and see if it's any good, and then we'll all come running, huh?
Yeah.
It's an online book group through the library, one of the Alexandria libraries.
Library.
Might be interesting to have the church take it over.
The Fairfax County Library also has an adequate list that they've associated with Black History Month.
Yeah. Well, David, that's a good point because, the problem isn't finding lists. Everybody has them right now because, it's over. Everybody wants to get involved. So it's finding, a curated version, something that's doable and, recommended.
I belong to a book club,
Mhm.
and many times I can't find the books at the library. And I have found a site where I can buy very, very affordable books called Abe's, ABE''S bookstore. And I was able to get several of my books from book club on that site. And some of them were like $4. Some of them were current ones were a little bit more, but none of them were very expensive.
All right, you heard it here, Abe's bookstore.
Abe's is a good example, but they're in the response to the Amazon monopoly. The independent bookstores have federated themselves, loosely federated themselves, and you can purchase through that system as well. I think also within the church, there's a circulation of books on the subject that could be enhanced as well. Books, articles are probably more effective. A lot of the books that were on the initial list, tend to be historic and come out of that culture. So
I'm really interested in the doing part, personally. I like reading about it and learning and all of that, but
I had a question about doing it.
Yeah.
Several episodes ago, we discussed the nexus between the opening of the spire and outreach,
Mhm.
and that there was to be a conversation between outreach and Goodwin House and coordinating the efforts there, and perhaps seeing how once people began to move into the spire, that outreach could be done to them to determine what their needs and wants are and our ability to meet those. And I wondered how that was coming along.
It hasn't moved any forward anymore other than talk since our last conversation about it, in part because, there's nobody in the spire yet. And last I knew, Kat knows more about this than I, it was going to be technically March 26th when the first people moved in, and we kind of doubt that they're going to make that date. And I don't know, I don't know exactly what Goodwin House's interest is, whether they're interested in direct connections, it's what it appears, or connections through us, you know. So it's a lot of questions, a lot of desires on our part, let's put it that way, and Goodwin House's part, but no coordination yet, in part waiting for more developments.
It would just seem like, looking at going back to the first of Coral's excellent slide presentation, that where she summarized the history of outreach, that it's both food and that educational activities culminating in the spire. It would seem that that presents itself as the nexus where to go.
Well, the good part about that is this. You know, at the formation retreat, we call it a conference, vestry conference this year. You know, we kind of double and triple down on that, David. We have 3 vestry people working together to connect with, create is necessary, and connect with sort of the community connections, of which, you know, the outreach to and with the spire could be considered part. But also our faith and outreach, we doubled down on that. So there are 5 of our 12, 13 actually vestry members, you know, engaged in getting ready for that. Now, where we are in that, you know, isn't mature yet.
Yeah.
But a strong desire all across our parish to do that. So I can't see it falling by the wayside.
I just want to remind you how things will happen at the Spire. Although March 26th is still, as far as I know, their target date for starting to move people in, the renting up and moving in process is going to stretch out over a period of time. When AHC goes to the city for its occupancy permit, it's only going to be looking for an occupancy permit for the 1st and 2nd floors, because work's not done on some of the floors upstairs. So they're not going to be all of a sudden 113 families in the apartment building. They're going to come in kind of waves over time. And as I understand it, AHC is not going to do anything with respect to surveying the tenants on their needs until they have a critical mass. And their usual procedure has been to have some sort of meeting in their community room. And that's not likely to happen this time. So they're thinking about some other kind of surveying method or smaller focus groups to identify those needs. So even though there may be a tenant as of March 26th, it may be several months before we have a feel for what it is that would be the most appropriate kind of outreach ministries to engage in with the tenants at the Spire.
Yeah. Fair enough, but our desire is strong.
Yeah, and I believe that the vestry working group is planning to put some kind of welcome to the neighborhood package together that AHC will distribute to people as they move in. And although, as I understand it, that package is going to be broader about the neighborhood, there's certainly going to be an opportunity for us to say something about resurrection and our hope for connection in that package.
Yeah. So we got running water in our building. Do you see that?
Ooh.
It's getting real. It's getting real.
Oh, this is good, right? I mean, it's water running where we want it to run and not
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
pipes are broken.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? And I hear the exterior cross is coming in early March 9th, maybe. And the question is, you know, as soon as the wires are out of the way, and they can put it up safely, it'll go up. In my view, that's sort of the last deal, you know. Now, who knows? So does anybody have any more questions, comments, suggestions on this subject before I change the subject momentarily?
No.
I want to thank you, Coral. It's a tricky
Thank
thing you
you.
did, a difficult thing, and I think you did it very well as usual.
Thank
And
you.
don't listen to her. Don't ever say no. Because you know what? You get inspiration, you know. And I think the results of this will be something you'll look back on, you know, for a long time and think it was a good thing. So thank you.